Good evening, friends, fiends, and spooky supernatural supremes. Welcome to A Bit Late. Tonight we are continuing our foray into Sleepy Hollow, or as tonight's reading should be called, Feasty Hollow. Like in the previous readings, Irving pays the utmost care and attention to foodstuffs and autumn desserts. So if you are the least bit hungry, I highly recommend finding a snack to munch on during tonight's sumptuous story. Consider yourself warned, right? Anyway, last we learned all about Ichabod Crane's rival in love for the beautiful Katrina Van Tassel, Brom Bones. That's his nickname, of course. Brom is a strong country hero who reminds me of Gaston, where Ichabod is more of a scholarly mind. Ichabod has received an invitation to attend a party that evening at the Van Tassels, and was primping for a long time. He set off, and we got quite an earful of autumnal descriptions, setting us right up for tonight's telling. The legend of Sleepy Hollow continued. It was toward evening that Ichabod arrived at the castle of the Heir Van Tassel, which he found thronged with the pride and flower of the adjacent country. Old farmers, a spare leathern-faced race, in homespun coats and breeches, blue stockings, huge shoes, and magnificent pewter buckles. Their brisk, withered dames in those close-crimped caps, long-waisted short gowns, homespun petticoats with scissors and pincushions, and gay calico pockets hanging on the outside. Buxom lasses almost as antiquated as their mothers, excepting where a straw hat, a fine ribbon, or perhaps a white frock, gave symptoms of city innovation. The sons in short square-skirted coats with rows of stupendous brass buttons, their hair generally queued in the fashion of the times, especially if they could procure an eel-skin for the purpose, it being esteemed throughout the country as a potent nourisher and strengthener of the hair. Oh, I didn't know that. Brom Bones, however, was the hero of the scene, of course, having come to the gathering on his favorite steed, Daredevil, a creature like himself full of mettle and mischief, and which no one but himself could manage. He was in fact noted for preferring vicious animals, given to all kinds of tricks which kept the rider in constant risk of his neck, for he held a tractable, well-broken horse as unworthy of a lad of spirit. They seem like unnecessary risks, Brom. I mean, maybe they feed an ego though. I don't know. Hope it's nourishing. Fain would I pause to dwell upon the world of charms that burst upon the enraptured gaze of my hero, here I believe he means Ichabod, as he entered the state of the parlor of Van Tassel's mansion. Not those of the bevy of buxom lasses with their luxurious display of red and white, but the ample charms of a genuine Dutch country tea table in the sumptuous time of autumn. If you're hungry, you have been warned. Here we go. Such heaped-up platters of cakes of various and almost indescribable kinds, known only to experienced Dutch housewives. There was the doughy donut, the tender olykoek, and this is a type of donut, friends and fiends, and the crisp and crumbling cruller, sweet cakes and shortcakes, ginger cakes and honey cakes, and the whole family of cakes. Oh, the whole family's here. And then there were apple pies and peach pies and pumpkin pies, besides slices of ham and smoked beef, and moreover delectable dishes of preserved plums and peaches and pears and quinces, not to mention broiled shad and roasted chickens, together with bowls of milk and cream, all mingled higgledy-piggledy, pretty much as I've enumerated them, with the motherly teapot sending up its clouds of vapor from the midst. Heaven bless the mark. Ooh, I will henceforth call my teapot a motherly teapot. I like that. I want breath and time to discuss this banquet as it deserves, and I am too eager to get on with my story. Happily, Ichabod Crane was not in so great a hurry as his historian, but did ample justice to every dainty. I was so worried that Ichabod would not eat everything on the table. He does spend all his time fantasizing about meals from the farm animals he sees after all. It would be remiss if he didn't have a piece of everything. Hungry yet? He was a kind and thankful creature whose heart dilated in proportion as his skin was filled with good cheer, and whose spirits rose with eating, as some men's do with drink. He could not help, too, rolling his eyes round him as he ate, and chuckling with the possibility that he might one day be lord of all this scene of utmost unimaginable luxury and splendor. When he marries Katrina? Then he thought how soon he'd turn his back upon the schoolhouse, snap his fingers in the face of Hans von Ripper and every other patron, and kick any itinerant pedagogue out of the doors that should dare to call him comrade. Oh, Ichabod and your fancies, come on, man. Old Baltus Van Tassel moved about among his guests with a face dilated with content and good humor, round and jolly as the harvest moon. His hospitable attentions were brief but expressive, being confined to a shake of the hand, a slap on the shoulder, a loud laugh, and a pressing invitation to fall to and help themselves. And now the sound of the music from the common room or hall summoned to the dance. Ichabod prided himself upon his dancing as much as his vocal powers. Not a limb, not a fiber about him was idle, and to have seen his loosely hung frame in full motion and clattering about the room, you would have thought St. Vitus himself, that blessed patron of the dance, was figuring before you in person. I mean, maybe he's graceful, but I just picture a lanky bird bobbing and weaving awkwardly, but he was the admiration of all. Maybe he's a really good bobber and weaver. The lady of his heart was his partner in the dance, and smiling graciously in reply to all his amorous oglings, while Brom Bones, sorely smitten with love and jealousy, sat brooding by himself in one corner. Oh, what's wrong, Brom? You can't dance? I thought you were like a champion athlete. The fact that Ichabod is a better dancer than Brom just makes me chuckle. When the dance was at an end, Ichabod was attracted to a knot of the sager folks who, with old Van Tassel, sat smoking at one end of the piazza, gossiping over former times, and drawing out long stories about the war. This neighborhood, at the time of which I am speaking, was one of those highly favored places which abound with chronicle and great men. The British and American line had run near it during the war. It had therefore been the scene of marauding and infested with refugees, cowboys, and all kinds of border chivalry. Just sufficient time had elapsed to enable each storyteller to dress up his tale with a little becoming fiction, and, in the indistinctness of his recollection, to make himself the hero of every exploit. There was the story of Defoe Martling, a large, blue-bearded Dutchman who had nearly taken a British frigate with an old iron 9-pounder from a mud breastwork, only that his gun burst at the 6th discharge. Aw, man. And there was an old gentleman who shall be nameless, being too rich a miner to be lightly mentioned, who, in the Battle of White Plains, being an excellent master of defense, parried a musket ball with a small sword, insomuch that he absolutely felt it whiz round the blade and glance off at the hilt, in proof of which he was ready at the time to show the sword with the hilt a little bent. There were several more that had been equally great in the field, not one of whom but was persuaded that he had a considerable hand in bringing the war to a happy termination. Ah yes, the times before social media and the internet. You can be the hero of your own story. Or, I guess it really doesn't matter, it's just fun storytelling at an autumn picnic of sorts. But all these tales were nothing to the tales of ghosts and apparitions that succeeded. Yes, finally. The neighborhood is rich in legendary treasures of the kind. We spent the whole first part being told about these strange happenings and cursed placement of the town. Local tales and superstitions thrive best in these sheltered, long-settled retreats, but are trampled underfoot by the shifting throng that forms the population of most of our country places. Besides, there is no encouragement for ghosts in most of our villages, for they have scarcely had time to finish their first nap and turn themselves in their graves before their surviving friends have traveled away from the neighborhood. Oh, that's kind of a sad thought. So that when they turn out at night to walk their rounds, they have no acquaintance left to call upon. I find myself getting sad for ghosts in their graves. This is perhaps the reason why we so seldom hear of ghosts except in our long-established Dutch communities. That is some food for thought. I never really thought of it like that. The immediate cause, however, of the prevalence of supernatural stories in these parts was doubtless owing to the vicinity of Sleepy Hollow. Da-na-na. There was a contagion in the very air that blew from that haunted region. It breathed forth an atmosphere of dreams and fancies infecting all the land. Several of the Sleepy Hollow people were present at Van Tassel's and, as usual, were doling out their wild and wonderful legends. Many dismal tales were told about funeral trains and mourning cries and wailings heard and seen about the great tree where the unfortunate Major Andre was taken, and which stood in the neighborhood. Some mention was made also of the woman in white that haunted the dark glen at Raven Rock, and was often heard to shriek on winter nights before a storm, having perished there in the snow. The chief part of these stories, however, turned upon the favorite specter of Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman, who had been heard several times of late patrolling the county, and it was said tethered his horse nightly among the graves in the churchyard. The sequestered situation of this church seems always have made it a favorite haunt of troubled spirits. It stands on a knoll surrounded by locust trees and lofty elms, from among which its decent whitewashed walls shine modestly forth, like purity beaming through the shades of retirement. A gentle slope descends to a silver sheet of water, bordered by high trees, between which peeps may be caught at the blue hills of the Hudson. To look upon its grass-grown yard where the sunbeams seem to sleep so quietly, one would think that there at least the dead might rest in peace. I would hope so. On one side of the church extends a wide woody dell, along which raves a large brook among broken rocks and trunks of fallen trees. Over a deep black part of the stream not far from the church was formerly thrown a wooden bridge. The road that led to it and the bridge itself were thickly shaded by overhanging trees, which cast a gloom about it, even in the daytime, but occasioned a fearful darkness at night. Such was one of the favorite haunts of the Headless Horseman, and the place where he was most frequently encountered. The tale was told of old Brower, a most heretical disbeliever in ghosts, how he met the horseman returning from his foray into Sleepy Hollow, and was obliged to get up behind him. How they galloped over bush and brake, over hill and swamp until they reached the bridge, when the horseman suddenly turned into a skeleton, threw old Brower into the brook, and sprang away over the treetops with a clap of thunder. This story was immediately matched by a thrice marvelous adventure of Brom Bones, of course, here he comes, who made light of the galloping Hessian as an errant jockey. He affirms that on returning one night from the neighboring village of Sing Sing, he had been overtaken by this midnight trooper, that he had offered to race with him for a bowl of punch, and should have won it too, for Daredevil beat the goblin horse all hollow. But just as they came to the church bridge, the Hessian bolted and vanished in a flash of fire. I mean, of course Brom would be like, hey man, let's totally race. All these tales told in that drowsy undertone with which men talk in the dark, the countenances of the listeners only now and then receiving a casual gleam from a glare of a pipe, sank deep in the mind of Ichabod. He repaid them in kind with large extracts from his invaluable author Cotton Mather, oh boy, so exciting, and added many marvelous events that had taken place in his native state of Connecticut, and fearful sights which he had seen in his nightly walks about Sleepy Hollow. Like fireflies, Ichabod? But as Ichabod is telling all his stories, tonight I will end this portion of the tale. Do keep your ear out for the next and final portion, when everything seems to happen. But thank you for joining me for tonight's telling of the tale. We have learned that Ichabod is a fantastic dancer, and that he ate every sweetmeat and such, which is quite awesome. And we learned some of the spooky creatures that haunt Sleepy Hollow area. So, with that, I hope you have the most pleasant of spooky dreams. Now, off to sleep and dream what you will, or stay a while and enjoy another tale. Whichever you choose, I'll speak to you again. And until then, stay spooky, my friend. Good night.